What's up? We're back with another Little Cup Premier League game, and this time I'm using a sticky web offense and my opponent is using a Sun team. And as always, make sure to smash that like button, it really helps out the channel. So I'm using a sticky web offensive team built around Life Orb Natu, Grookey, Scraggy, and Stealth Rock Archon. And meanwhile, my opponent is using a Sun team built around Scarf Charmander. And Scarf Charmander is one of the most interesting Pokemon in Little Cup because of its ability Solar Power, which makes it incredibly strong under the sun, and it's one of the most difficult things to deal with. So it's basically a matchup between two really offensive teams and two really fun teams to play with. And one thing to note is that my opponent has Natu. And Natu is going to make it really tough for my Dewpider, because Dewpider, on one hand, it can one-hit KO Natu. But on the other hand, if I sticky web into the Natu, that's going to be a really big problem for me because the sticky web gets bounced back. So I'm looking at my game plan right now, and one thing I've noticed is that he doesn't have a flying resist. So my Natu and my Archon are both going to be really good. So that's basically my game plan. I'm going to try and break through with Natu and Archon, and he's going to try and break through with Charmander. So we start off the game, and he leads Timber and I lead Dewpider. And I'll be honest, I didn't understand his Timber lead. It doesn't match up well versus anything on my team, besides maybe Scraggy. So I did not understand the Timber lead. So from my point of view, I'm already off to a good start. But the problem right now is, how do I get my sticky webs up? How do I get it up versus the Natu? And ultimately, it's going to come down to predictions, right? If I predict right, I can kill the Natu, or I can get sticky webs up. But if I predict wrong, I'm in trouble. But one thing you have to understand, it's not just a blind predict. It's not just flipping a coin and predicting. Because if you notice, say the worst case scenario, he goes Natu and I go sticky web, right? So sticky web gets bounced onto me, but it's not actually a big deal. Because as I mentioned earlier, Natu and Archon are going to be my wall breakers, and they aren't affected by sticky web. So I'm not totally fine with sticky web going up, but it's not as big a deal. Because if you think about it, Pumpkaboo is probably not going to be too good this game, but because it's versus a double fire. Right? So Pumpkaboo is not going to be good this game. Grookey has Glassy Glide, so Natu and Archon aren't affected. So only Scraggy is going to be really hurt by sticky webs. So overall, I'm okay with getting bounced back, right? Now, let's say, for example, that my team was really weak to sticky webs. I wouldn't even think about getting sticky webs up because it's too risky. I'm not even going to think about it, right? But because my team isn't that weak to sticky webs, I'm going to be pretty okay with trying to predict and trying to get my sticky webs up. Turn 1, I surf predicting Natu, and he goes Marini, and he reveals that he's actually E-Button. And E-Button is a really good tech on Sun teams because Charmander is really powerful, but it's also very frail. It's not going to live a hit. So the idea is to use Eject Button Marini to get Charmander in. That's the concept of Eject Button Marini. And he goes to Vulpix here. And Vulpix is good for two reasons. Because one, it sets up the Sun, which is what he wants to do, right? But two, it makes my Surf that much weaker in Sun. So it becomes a kind of a difficult guessing game right now. And again, I predict Natu, so I'm going to use Surf right here. And I don't kill the Vulpix, but I get good damage off. And now he finally goes Natu, and I sticky web and it gets bounced. And I predict wrong. So I tried to get my predictions right, but ultimately I got my predictions wrong. But it's not the end of the world, because as I said earlier, my team isn't that weak to sticky webs. So I made a prediction and it didn't work out. I got outplayed. He has sticky webs up, but meanwhile I have good damage on Vulpix. And that's pretty much the trade that happened. So he uses Psychic with Dewpider. I Icy Wind. And Natu reveals its Berry Juice and actually lives a hit. And now I sacrifice Dewpider to get damage on Natu. And now I go Natu to Revenge Kill, and you'll notice he doesn't have a switch in, right? Because as I said earlier, his team is weak to Natu, it's weak to Archon. He doesn't have a switch in, and he sacrifices Natu here. And now he's going to bring in his Charmander, and Charmander is a huge threat. I barely have anything that can switch in. So I make the strategic decision that Pumpkaboo is not going to be that good this game. Its job is to spin block, but there's nothing to actually spin block. There's no Staryu to spin block. So what I do is I end up sacrificing Pumpkaboo. So it does literally nothing that game, which is unfortunate. And Charmander hits a Weather Ball. And now that's going to bring my Archon in. And Archon, it doesn't die, and I get Stealth Rock up here. And The reason I get Stealth Rock up here is because Vulpix is at 5% right now. So that means Vulpix cannot come back in. And based on team structure, it's probably going to be Defog Timber. So it's very likely that he is simply going to sacrifice Timber for Defog at some point in the game. And I think I'm in a pretty good position. Sun is running out. Vulpix is going to die. I have Stealth Rock up. I'm thinking I'm in a pretty good position, but I have to be very careful versus that Charmander, because Charmander can outspeed my entire team. And if I get even a little bit of damage on Archon, then Charmander can sweep me. So Sun runs out and he sacrifices Marini here. Marini was not going to be too useful, so it gets sacrificed to Earthquake. And now he goes to Timber. And I dual Wing Beat on the Defog. So he defogs. And now this is a very critical moment of the game. And I switch out to Grookey. And what happens is he's going to use Mach Punch. Because if my Archon takes any damage, it's going to lose to the Charmander. So even though I could have killed Timber, I couldn't risk taking the damage from Mach Punch. So I actually go Grookey to live the Mach Punch. And now Grookey is in a dominant position, and I can actually go for the kill. So he sacrifices Vulpix here, and I get the kill on Vulpix. And now it's a very interesting endgame. And what he does, he brings in Charmander, obviously. And I have to be very careful about what do I sacrifice and how do I do it. Because one thing to note is that Archon has an ability called Defeatist, which you probably know, but it's going to make me quite weak if I get hit by a Weather Ball. So I have to be really careful about how I approach the game. Pause the video if you want and see if you can find an endgame path for winning the game. But basically, I decide to sacrifice Grookey for chip damage with Grassy Glide. And he uses Weather Ball. I die, he takes some solar power damage, some healing too, and now I go Archon. And now he goes to Diglett, and Dueling Beat doesn't do enough. And right now, why did he switch, right? Because the problem is that even if I go into Defeatist range, Charmander is still going to die, essentially, to dual Wing Beat plus solar power damage. So he didn't want to lose Charmander here. So he goes to Diglett, and it's Eviolite Diglett, so it lives the hit. And now what I'm really worried about is Stealth Rock from Diglett, because if he can get Stealth Rock up, or maybe some chip damage on Archon, then Charmander can win the game. So I'm really scared of Stealth Rock Diglett. So I go to Natu here, predicting Stealth Rock, and he uses Sucker Punch, which means he probably didn't have Stealth Rock, or well, he did have Stealth Rock, he didn't want to use it. Instead, he was trying to Sucker Punch Archon to get the chip damage. And now I'm in pretty good shape. And I go to Scraggy here, as he uses Sucker Punch again, and now I'm in a dominant position, right? So he goes to Charmander, and I Dragon Dance here, and this was a little bit of a misplay, but it's not ultimately going to be a big deal, because I reveal that I am actually Protect Scraggy, and this is really important because it means I can keep stalling out Sun turns, and Vulpix is dead, so it's really good for me. Weather Ball here, totally fine. I sacrifice Natu here because I don't need it right now. Weather Ball. And now the game is over because Sun has run out and he has nothing to deal with my Scraggy. Charmander is too weak, Timber is too slow, and Diglett is too weak. The game is over right now. He can't really do much. He goes to Timber right now. I high jump kick, I get the kill. And he goes to Charmander right now. He goes to Charmander, but I protect to Scout for a move. He reveals he has Overheat. And I calc Overheat, and Overheat does not kill Scraggy. So now he overheats again. I don't die, I heal back up, and now I knock off. And now the game is truly over. He goes to Diglett, but Diglett cannot touch Scraggy. And that's it. Scraggy wins the game, and I win the match. And a lot of you have commented about the tournament itself, so I thought I would show that too. So it's a tournament called Little Cup Premier League, which is the second most popular Little Cup tournament after Levy's Premier League. And in that, I'm managing a team called the Roly Colies. And if you know what this is a reference to, make sure to comment below, because not many people know what this is actually about. But this is my team, and right now we're in 3rd place, and top 4 make the playoffs, right? And there's 1 week left. And we have to basically do really well in this week to keep our 3rd place spot. And if we can keep that 3rd place spot, we move on to the playoffs, which is really important. We make the semifinals.